Hey, thanks for listening to Everyday Greatness. It's a nice little show brought to you by our major sponsor, ARA Group, an employee-owned company that provides essential services for your facility and infrastructure and is one of Australia's biggest supporters of community projects. Everyday Greatness isn't rocket science. We're just trying to make you feel proud again of simply being a good, solid human being by speaking to some real people who found that the strength they needed to deal with any challenge in their life had been inside them the whole time. The ARA Group is proud to stand alongside Everyday Greatness, and we all hope that you enjoy the show.
This is exciting. The story of our next guest, former AFL Sydney Swan player Brandon Jack, is a story of modern bravery, if you will. Brandon was expected to be an elite sports star. His father, Gary, was an international rugby league player, and his brother Kieran captained the Sydney Swans to an AFL premiership. So when Brandon was drafted to the Swans in 2013, most people just expected him to be a superstar in professional sports. But that wasn't the person that Brandon wanted to be. He felt he had more value to offer the world than just running around, getting a kick, and then getting blind drunk after the game. So in a meeting with Sydney Swans head coach John Longmire, Brandon said that he'd like to leave the club as his heart wasn't in it, and they amicably parted ways, and Brandon is now living the life he wants. So that's pretty gutsy, I reckon, pretty gutsy. So he's played music in a band. He's a freelance journalist. He speaks to schools, especially helping young boys by telling them the importance of setting a good example and the need of men to pull their heads in. His biography, 28, that's 28, just the numerals, 28, was just listed. You got to listen, this is fabulous. It was just listed in the top 20 sporting biographies in the world by GQ magazine. Like, if that's not a wow, nothing's a wow. That's a wow. So through his bravery, Brandon is setting an example for the rest of us and showing that you don't have to do what's expected of you. You've got to be the person that you want to be, and just do it with passion. Be proud of the person you are anytime, any day. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome to Everyday Greatness, Brandon Jack. G'day, Brandon.
G'day, Scott. How's it going?
Oh, mate, what a story you've got. Hey, that's totally the reverse of everybody else's dream. Everybody wants to go and play, and you said, nah, don't want to play. Don't want to. Nah.
Yeah, I mean, you did kind of sum it up quite nicely just then, and there's obviously a lot more to it. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a book in it. Yeah. It's it's an interesting journey, and football is very central to my life, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a fair bit today. So I'm excited to see where things head today. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we will get to your career at the Sydney Swans in a second, but tell me about the club where it all started, Brandon, the Pennant Hills Demons. What's your memories of the Demons?
Okay, so my connection to Penno started with Kieran playing, obviously. So before I ever thought to play Aussie rules, I was a staunch rugby league fan growing up. You know, I would have I rocked up to Kieran's games at Holmes Oval in my Penno Stags kit from the morning. That was my weekend, I guess. I kind of play my footy in the morning, and then mum and dad would then kind of rush us off to the next kid's game. And I first saw Aussie rules at Holmes, watching Kieran play for Penno, and then probably 10 years after that, I then transitioned to play Aussie rules myself. Wasn't having a good go at rugby league, was too small, was getting bashed around, and to be honest, wouldn't have made the top league, and that's what I was playing for. And then, I started playing. Originally, I played 2 years of junior footy with Westbrook, which is a kind of feeder club for Penno in a way. But then when I got to Penno as a 16-year-old, that's when things really ramped up. And I played 2 years of, senior footy against other men. Well, against men. I wasn't a man then. I was a 16-year-old boy who weighed 50 kilos. But kind of realised that, I did have a bit of potential, and was nurtured by some good people at that club. And it's a footy club that I do have a lot of respect for today and admire the way they go about things.
Yeah, good on you. Now, tell me about your book. Your book is called 28. It's described as a memoir of football addiction, art, masculinity, and love. And it paints a picture of a young fella whose professional sporting career wasn't spent beneath the big bright lights, but on the fringe of the field, fighting for a spot on the team. That's really good. And then the destructive forces such as experience can bring about. So what sort of destructive forces did
Well,
it bring about for you?
The book itself, so 28, it's funny, I was looking through, I'd gotten a deal to write a memoir or a series of essays originally, and that had nothing to do with football. And I remember I read over it the other day, the original submission, and in that transcript, I wrote briefly about football. I think I did a bunch of dot points about my footy career. So I didn't want to talk about it because I was still very much angry with how things went and kind of disappointed in myself in a way still. And I had written that I only played 27 games. Like I didn't even know how many games I'd played. That's how far from my mind it was. So then obviously I had to look at myself on Wikipedia to find out I did play 28 games. And the story there is that's actually that's the realistic kind of expectation you should have going into an AFL system. That's the average career length almost. Very few people play 300 games, yet those are the ones we do get the books from often, isn't it? It's the grand final heroes and the Brownlow medalists and the people who have done everything.
Absolutely.
But none of that covered my experience, and the probably 90% of AFL careers, as you come in, you are on a list of 40-odd players and, only 22 get picked each week. And you're kind of hiding from the coach in the gym because you don't want to get a tap on the shoulder saying you're not playing or you're the emergency. And the emergency role involving getting ready for a game, doing the inside warm-up, and then watching everyone else run out. And you have to take your ankle tape off and sit in the change room and go like far out. I was really excited to play just then, or I was getting myself up to play and I didn't. And that's the part of professional footy that we don't really see. And people, when I tell them those stories, they're like, oh, I didn't realize you had to wait around for a text message on a Wednesday afternoon saying what time your meeting was. And that whole text message decides your mental capacity, your mental kind of head state for the next week, because you're either a seniors player or a resis player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you take that base and you can understand what it's like to not be in the team. And then I think everyone experiences that in a way in their life, and the destructive stuff comes off the back of that.
Absolutely. So were you ever taken seriously if you voiced your concerns about destructive forces or whatever? Did you feel like you were just stuck on that treadmill to becoming a sports person? Was that a thing that you had to be?
No, I mean, I didn't voice my concerns at all. I just it was the way we handled things, the guys in my position, we became a close-knit group and we just drank. And that was our way of literally of handling, we're not in the team, so we're just going to drink piss with each other. And you kind of walk into the club on Monday and I don't think anyone's like, oh, you guys should maybe talk to someone about this, which would have been a probably healthier thing to do. It's kind of just like, oh, they're the piss heads of the club. Those boys will always be out if you want to have a beer. And that's how it was handled. Yeah.
So when you did get drafted by the Sydney Swans, how exhilarating was that? Or was it a relief that you'd taken the next step?
It's a funny story because I remember the draft night was on TV and I didn't get picked up. And I kind of heard a few rumours, had a few emails that maybe I might get picked up by the Swans in the national draft. It didn't happen. And I kind of wasn't too upset about it because at that point in my life, I was, I could have happily walked away from footy at that point and been like, I wasn't good enough to get picked. It's taken out of my hands, saved me from having to say to mum and dad, that I didn't want to play anymore because I just didn't get picked. But a few days later after that, I got a phone call from someone at the Swans. I think I was driving home from a mate's house, and they said, oh, you've been invited to come and train with the club for a month. And if you do all right then you might get a rookie contract. So I moved out of home the next day, I think, and moved in with Kieran. And then for a month, trained with the senior team. So I was just fresh out of high school, like didn't go on schoolies. I was training when I should have been at schoolies or could have been at schoolies.
Wow.
So it was literally like just after I finished exams. So I moved out of home and then was training, the professional training schedule for a month, trained pretty well. And then, got a contract, got a rookie deal at the end of that. And I remember being pretty excited when I got that rookie deal. I knew I was a good footy player, and I always had this expectation that I would play professional footy, and I was very proud when it happened. But kind of everything that happened after that is a bit of a different reality.
Yeah. But you're at the Swans in what we term a golden era, because there were some magic players there. Did any of the senior players pull you aside and give you some words of wisdom or anything?
I mean, so I was there 2013 to 2017, and I think so. They just won the 2012 grand final, and I was in the sheds after that grand final. I was awestruck by those guys. And I think they lost the 2014 and 2016 grand finals, and were like consistently top of the table. So it was a bloody good time, like really good team to be a part of.
Yeah.
I played with the likes of Adam Goods and Lance Franklin and Jared McVeigh, Joey Kennedy, like some really big names. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint, specific advice. I remember Goodsy. Goodsy was just someone who was an incredible role model. I mean, he had a way of talking to everyone at the club without being too hard on them or really empathetically. He spoke, and I remember a few leaders kind of would just hit you between the eyes and walk off. but Goodsy had a way of putting his arm around you, and I mean, he didn't have to. He was the superstar when I got there. He could have just ignored me and gone, mate, when you've played 100 games, then come talk to me. But as a young player, he made you feel welcome, and he put himself on your level. And that's the kind of leadership stuff that stuck with me.
That's major, isn't it? That is major. Yeah. That says so much more about just reading the back of a paper. Hey, did you ever talk to any of your teammates about feeling like maybe you wanted to do something else with your life?
I originally hid it from them. So when I was I think it was my 4th year at the club, I started getting, so I played for 5 years. My 4th year at the club, I started getting really into music, and it was something that I enjoyed doing as a kid and as a teenager. But when footy got really serious, I just kind of put it on the back burner because I wanted to devote all my time to footy. But I kind of hid it from them, yeah. I mean, I'd write stuff in a notebook that I'd carry around with me, but I wouldn't show it I wouldn't want to be seen with that notebook. And I'd play guitar in my room alone and sing on my own and didn't really want to share that with them. And then funny, when I kind of knew I was done at the club in my last year, I then kind of started to play it up a bit more and be like, hey, I don't belong here. Like, I'm going to do this as a kind of it was a bit of an easy out to be like, I don't care about this stuff. Like, I'm going to do music stuff. But, I didn't, I mean, there wasn't probably many guys to talk to about it because it wasn't a common interest. But, I ebbed and flowed between how much I shared and how much I hid.
Well, you're terrific. You're terrific to talk to. I'm going to give Barnaby a turn because Barnaby's got a whole bunch of questions being a fellow demon. So here comes Barnaby for you. Thanks a lot, Brandon.
That's all right.
Thanks, Scotty. And hello, Brandon. Go you D's.
G'day, Barnaby.
So you're also a type 1 diabetic. How difficult was it managing that while you were swimming in uncertainty while you were playing footy at the Swans?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed type 1 diabetes when I was 13, and there was no family history or anything that I was aware of. So it was a very strange thing. You have all those symptoms of going to the bathroom 6-7 times a night and drinking water all the time. And I'd lost a bit of weight and I was already stick thin. And then the diagnosis comes, and then you're giving 5 injections a day from then on. And it's just, you're checking your blood sugar before every meal. I'm pretty lucky. Not lucky because I work hard at it. I've had a good kind of management of my blood sugar levels throughout my life. I want my body to be in good shape in a way. So I make sure I get a certain 3-month reading at the doctor's. But at the same time, there's times when I've definitely, on the field, for example, I've had a really, really high blood sugar, but I don't, I should probably say I shouldn't play, but I'd never do that.
Yeah.
Because, when you're out in the, you see it, not to compare it too closely to the concussion side of things, but you'd see blokes get concussed, they don't want to come off. They want to stay on the field. And that mindset kind of I would never come off with a high blood sugar. And I wouldn't give that advice to kids coming through. I'd say, no, make sure your sugar's all right. But in the moment when I was in that mindset, it was playing comes first, diabetes comes second, which, long-term implications of that aren't great. But as a young bloke who just wanted to kind of play footy at that point, there were moments when it wasn't great.
Yeah. So when you were at the Swans, AFL talent identification programs were booming with things like the Swans Academy. How much pressure did that add to you as a young kid when there was so much quality competition around you, all vying for exactly the same thing?
Yeah, so I came through, I kind of saw it transition to the academy. So they had a scholarship program, and I really wanted to get a scholarship because it meant you got $20,000 or something and got to train with the club, and I just wanted the money. But but I wasn't good enough. I just missed out on that. So they transitioned that program to the academy, which at the start was only a group of about 20 of us or 25 of us. And I mean, now there's like 400 kids in the academy of the different age groups. And I think we had Paul Ruse was our first coach, and all the stories about Rusey and his kind of ruthlessness on senior players. I mean, he did that with us as kids as well. I remember getting a one-on-one session with Rusey as a 16-year-old, and he ranked me 2 out of 5 for skills, 2 out of 5 for fitness, and 2 out of 5 for commitment. And the commitment was because I was late to training because I had schoolwork. So I was always a bit filthy at Rusey for that. But, you know, that's in a way I got used to, you know, that led me into the professionalism of the sport, and I was well prepared going in for the honesty that was required. In terms of pressure, you know, I think I'm a bit of a rare case because growing up with a dad who was, you know, one of the best footy players in the world, and obviously Kieran's success, like I always felt a level of pressure that pressure to me doesn't feel like anything because it's always there. And it's my own kind of expectations of myself in a way.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it became. I struggle, you know, I've done interviews before and when I was playing, and I said, no, I never felt pressure to follow my dad's footsteps. But that's because it was so internal for me. That was just my normal.
Yeah. So you got pretty intense with yourself while you had all this pressure on you trying to make it as a professional athlete. You wrote one particular diary entry that you've shared in your time at the Swans where you said, I'm the most relentless player on the field. I'm never beaten one-on-one. Were you just trying to convince yourself of something that in your heart of hearts you didn't believe was true?
In a way, yeah. I think that was a big thing at the Swans, was the idea of a trademark. And whenever the Bloods culture comes up in that 05 grand final, and, you know, they had this kind of leading team session where you look at the culture of the club and individuals, and that was still there when I was there. The idea of a trademark is, so I am the most relentless player on the field, or I am the best one-on-one defender in the comp. And every single player in our group had one of those for themselves. And that was kind of, you know, logically it doesn't make sense because we can't all be the best one-on-one defender in the comp, can we? We can't all be the best two-way running midfielder. Like, there's only one of them. So it's obviously a sense of conning yourself into this thought process. And I know I would never say that when I was there because to go against it would be heathenish. But yeah, so I definitely did that all the time. My diary entries from that time are pretty confronting because it's like, it's a form of like motivation, but there's a lot of like angst there and self-loathing at times, and stuff about, you know, I hate my coach. Like, I effing hate John Longmire because he didn't pick me. And that's my head coach. And I'm in a position where I'm like, he's not picking me, so I hate him. And then the next week he might pick me. So I've got to play for a bloke who I've just said I hate. Like, that's the sort of little loops I used to twist myself into.
That sounds intense. You sound like you're carrying a really heavy load on your shoulders. How did that pressure that you felt manifest itself? Did you party hard after games, break down and cry, speak to friends, get advice?
I mean, all of those, but the last two. No, none of the healthy coping mechanisms. We wouldn't do any of that. I guess my mechanisms were to really burn myself into the ground with my training, and you know, I'm fairly confident that if you asked anyone who was at the Swans when I was there, that I think they'd point to me as the like most consistently hardworking trainer, and I kind of did that because that's what Kieran was known as, and I wanted to be what Kieran was. So when I heard he was the hardest trainer, I was like, well, I'm going to be the hardest trainer. And I would just, you know, I'd do the extras. I never missed a session. I would continually top our like pre-season long GPS data, and I would just burn myself to get to try and become the best I could be. But also because I was so scared of failure that I thought if I just keep working, I won't fail. That was my mindset. And then off the field, you know, the drinking side of things really did ramp up as my career started to kind of go off the rails a bit, and I wasn't getting picked anymore. The time spent at nightclubs and the amount of alcohol I consumed definitely picked up. And you know, it's a common story. It's a way to numb yourself. It's a way to feel a bit of happiness, but it's not doesn't like last. It just fades away, and you wake up the next morning feeling worse.
Yeah. Do you regret spending so many years of your life pursuing a career in professional sport? Do you wish you'd gone straight from school into the arts?
This is a really good question. I do think about this a fair bit. I mean, I've never, for example, I've never travelled to Europe or done like European summer, and that's a really, first world problem. But if I hadn't have played footy, then I might have spent a year abroad, and I might have learned a few things about myself, things that I'm like just starting to discover now post footy. But at the same time, you can't change that, and I've learnt a lot from my time in footy. The kind of work ethic I have, the attitude I have towards being able to achieve things if I put my mind to it, instilled in me through sports. I got a book out of it. I'm going to continue to write more about football because it's a part of the world that I know so intimately that there's not a whole heap of good books written about footy, especially not like fiction, for example. And I know footy so well that I think I could really do some work in that space. So, I view the silver linings of it. It's given me a lot to write about. I essentially did research my whole life on being a professional footy player.
Very mature response. Now, Brandon, I passionately hate footy puns, but I'm going to drag myself and bring Scott Gibbons back on and take you through the last quarter. Scott.
Back with you, Brandon. So your life now, you've got your fingers in a lot of pies in the arts world these days. So you're an author, a band member, a journalist. Are you now living the life that you've dreamed about?
It's funny because I wouldn't have dreamt of this life growing up because I didn't know you could live it. Like literally what I knew was like, you're just going to play footy. So it's not like I was a 15-year-old kid being like, oh, one day I'll be a writer. So I didn't know any writers. But now, I feel like I'm in control of what I do with my life, and I'm choosing the path to follow. And it's still learning every day. Like I haven't done anything with music for like 6 months because I just don't feel like it. So I'm writing other stuff, and that's the fortunate position I'm in, where I can follow these kind of interests as they come. And that to me is it's a real luxury in life where I'm able to spend time honing my craft in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, what's your favourite craft now? What?
Well, at the moment, I'm working on a novel. So I've been, I've never really written fiction before, and my high school English teachers would tell you that my fiction writing was horrendous back then, and I totally I bombed out in creative writing all the time. But now because I've started, the past 5-6 years, I read like 2 books a week, and I've started to dedicate myself to that craft, and I'm learning how to write fiction, and I'm learning how to piece together a novel. And that to me, like learning how to do anything new is such an enjoyable process for me. So at the moment it's writing a novel, but I think I tend to do things and then move on and find new things to do. So who knows what'll come after that.
Yeah. And are you self-taught doing that, or have you found yourself a mentor? Or?
Yeah. I'm very fortunate that I've got, off the back of 28, I've made some good connections in the literary world in Australia, and I've got a few friends who have also written books, and we kind of talk to each other about it and the process, and that side of thing fascinates me, learning about other people's process. But I do have a mindset of if I learn too much from somebody else, then I'm just going to imitate what they do. So I like the idea of getting my hands dirty and doing it my way, and that being something new in a way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So when you left the Swans at, what were you, the age of 23, I guess? You
23, yeah.
You played 28 games, but your book's been listed with GQ magazine as one of the 20 best sport books to read right now. So why do you think your books resonated so strongly with the world? Because most of them, as you were saying, most books are written by people who've done 150 games or 300 games or Brownlows or premierships or whatever. So what was the reason you think yours resonated?
I mean, that's one side of it, I think, for sure. I'm so surprised we haven't got. I mean, I don't think there's been a book like that about somebody who didn't make it, because I can see why publishers wouldn't think that would sell. Because we glorify success so much, and I want to hear about. I love success in sports. I love reading about like Wayne Gretzky or hearing about Michael Jordan. Like that's just innate. But the other side of it is quite relatable, and that's the thing I've been hearing from a lot of people who didn't play football who relate to the messages of it. But as well, like not to toot my own horn, but I worked at this book bloody hard and spent 2 years every day working on it. It was my priority for 2 years. And I think, having been to a few writers' festivals and been around the community, I understand that sports memoirs, the ghost-written kind, are kind of almost like a laughing stock, like at the end of a punchline in that world, because it's an athlete who just works with a ghostwriter and they just kind of do this superficially kind of thing. And I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule. I have read some good ghost-written sports books, but I was the writer and the story hand in hand, and I was like manically writing my thoughts down and thinking about this all the time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a level of rawness there as a result. I'm not trying to get in the head of somebody else. I'm in my head all the time.
Yeah.
And the amount of rewriting and evolution of thought that happened, like if I worked with a ghostwriter, I would have driven them freaking mad. So I would have called them up. I would have called them up every 10 minutes and be like, no, we're going to change this. That's not how I feel anymore. So I guess, being the writer and the story allowed me to do that.
Yeah. So what was being a pro athlete all that it was cracked up to be?
I think no. And that's a real blunt answer, because I didn't, everything I thought I'd have in my childhood, the getting carried off the ground after 200 games or winning a grand final or having a medal around my neck. Like I never got any of that. And those are the parts that I was so intently focused on. But the other parts of professional sport, I made some really good mates through it. And I've learned a lot about myself as a person as a result, and have acquired skills from it. So the reality of the experience is great in a lot of ways, but the expectation is kind of really distorted. And I guess coming out the other side of that, I can see it and try and tell that to people, but I don't want to take the shine off, but I still want people to think that it can be really awesome. And that's a delicate balance, because you don't want to go up to a 15-year-old kid and be like, it sucks. Like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go up to a kid and say it can be awful, because you want them to still have like the wide eyes about it in a way. So it's a delicate kind of thing to get across to people.
Oh, that's nice that you're not sour on the game. That's just terrific. So do you think
for a while? I was. So, and that's why I'm glad that the book didn't come out 1 year after playing. It was 4 years later.
Yeah.
Would have been a bit different then.
Yeah, second version. So do you think all the anxiety and the pressure and your struggle to find your identity was worth it now that you're the man that you want to be, or are you being forced to be somebody you're not?
No, I'm still figuring out who I am. I mean, I don't think, and that's the thing, to convince myself that I have figured it out is a lie, and that would be misleading to everyone out there. I guess I'm just more accepting of that and more open that tomorrow I might wake up wanting to be something different, and that's okay. The idea of just setting in stone expectations is quite a dangerous thing to do. And I think that's what people find relatable. And the fact that I got a lot of feedback from the book about people saying, like, this doesn't feel like an ending in a way. It doesn't feel like you've just resolved anything too strongly. And that's nice, because I haven't.
And that leaves an opening for
book 2, book 3.
I don't know what you call it. 29.
Yeah, exactly.
So the book 2828, just the numerals 28. Where do folks get your book?
I mean, you can get it any. I mean, Booktopia is a place you can get it, but I would recommend people go to their local bookstores, because it's really important that we do support our local bookstores at the moment. And if they don't have it in, then I'm sure they can order it in.
You're a good man. You're a good man saying that. That's lovely of you.
Yes, because the big online will have it, but preference is go to your local.
Yeah, and build a relationship with your bookshop. Yeah, that's good.
Exactly right.
I've got to say thank you to you. You're very inspiring in so many different ways, because it's not all just puff up, but you're prepared to tell it both sides of the story, which is terrific.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you.
So what I'll do is I'll thank you now, Brandon, for joining us. And I've got to thank everyone who's listening for listening, and to thank the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for the 5th year in a row. And a huge, huge thanks to Look Studio Australia, because they've been recording this podcast for us. And I hope when you put down your device later on and you lift your head up and you put your shoulders back, and you walk down the street feeling proud to be an everyday Joe or Joey in Baker Donuts. That's what we want you to do, is puff your chest out and feel real good about yourself. Now, you can listen to Everyday Greatness next week, and Barnaby and I will be talking to Juliet O'Brien. She's a digital and data journalist, an author, and the daughter of Gail and the late Professor Chris O'Brien, who was famous for so many things, but you may have heard of the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse in Sydney, which is just an incredible one-stop shop, if you will, for cancer care. So we'll talk to Juliet O'Brien about the wisdom passed down from her parents, which helped her deal with losing her father and her brother far too early. But we hope you can join us for that. And in the meantime, we want you to find out more about the show. So to do that, you just go to the website, which is everydaygreatness.com.au. That's everydaygreatness.com.au. Or you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or LinkedIn. But we've got to thank Brandon, because you were just terrific to talk to. I reckon we could do series 2 again. Series 6. Well, when you do your next book, we want you back.
Awesome. No, yeah, I'd love to come back, guys. Thanks. It was a really awesome chat.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks, Barnaby.